Hey, well, hello there. Sorry, I was just looking up, trying to lose some weight. So I was looking up a new diet online here and I saw this one that says you can eat nothing but almonds. Man, that's just nuts. I don't know if I want to try that or not. Anyway, I want to take a few minutes here and we are going to talk about sources of American law. And as always, if you find this video helpful or interesting, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, share it with a friend. Okay, someone that may be needing some help with some introductory business law. But first, like, what is law? All right. Well, simply put, that's the rules that we have in society, right? And they're enforceable rules. All right. But they're not always just so black and white. There's a bunch of gray area when it comes into law. And you also have, ethical decisions, as Lou Holtz would say, the do right rule, you know. Um, so law can be very tricky. But before we get into like learning what actually law is, we need to know, where does law come from? Well, first and foremost, the most supreme law we have is the United States Constitution. Now, if you have not read it, I highly suggest you go out and check it out. But I'm going to share my screen with you here, and let's just highlight some things with our Constitution. First, know that it comes in 7 sections, and then you start with your amendments, right? So Article 1 of our Constitution basically lays out our rules for Congress, how it's going to be set up. There is one interesting part here that I want to bring your attention to in here on Article 1. When you get to Section 8, it says Congress has all these powers to lay and collect taxes, duties, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they have that, right? But the one I'm highlighting right here is the one I want to draw your attention to. This is known as the Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution. So Congress has the power to regulate commerce. Commerce meaning business transactions, okay, with foreign nations and among the states. Okay, as we start moving through the amendments, you're going to see like Amendment 10 in the Bill of Rights gives every power that's not in the Constitution, it kicks it to the states and gives it the power to them. Okay, this is that the separation of powers, this feudalism kind of republic that we have set up here to kind of keep it separate. This Commerce Clause has been used quite often for the federal government for a power grab, but it makes sense because with technology and mobility and everything, there is basically no commerce that is not done state to state anymore, unless you are just a small sole proprietorship, mom and pop type of business working in your local area. Okay, so it's just kind of interesting there. You'll read about that in your text and stuff, and check more into that on that Commerce Clause. All right. So Section 2 of the Constitution here, or Article 2, lays out the executive branch, which is the presidential powers and the vice presidential powers. When we get to Article 3, we start talking about the judicial branch. So those are our 3 branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Article 4, okay, basically is kind of talking about information sharing. Read through, it's for the states, right? You cannot escape to one state if you have a crime in another. The courts need to share information and stuff like that. Article 5 gives Congress the power to make amendments. Article 6 is talking about old debt, and Article 7 ratifies it. Okay, and that is the basic Constitution right there. As it was written, it was signed. And then we have amendments, and immediately there were 10 amendments put onto the Constitution, known as our Bill of Rights. Okay, so these are good to know. Amendment 1, right? Freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, freedom of speech, freedom to petition the government. A lot of our basic fundamental rights here are found in Amendment 1. Amendment 2, we talk about the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Amendment 3, we should not have to house soldiers. Amendment 4 is an amendment against illegal search and seizures. Amendment 5, most people know because you says you have the right to remain silent, right? That is your 5th Amendment. You cannot incriminate yourself. double jeopardy, so you cannot be tried for the same case twice. That is also found in that Fifth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment guarantees you a speedy trial, while the Seventh Amendment goes on to guarantee you a trial by jury. The Eighth Amendment is against excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment. The Ninth, just saying that people still have their certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that was put into the Declaration of Independence. Okay, even though certain rights are given to the federal government. And then Amendment 10, as I kind of mentioned before, said anything that we haven't specifically said in this document that the federal government can do, then it goes to the states. Okay, and the states can make up their mind how they want to legislate or make laws on that. So, okay, so that's kind of when the Constitution was written. We had the main part there, then they immediately had those 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights. Okay, since then, there has been more amendments added, and it goes on. I believe there are 27, right? Yes, 27. The last one being added in 1992. Okay, and I suggest you read through and get to know them. Just some of the highlights in here. Okay, the 13th one, the 13th Amendment, that's a pretty big amendment, right? It ended slavery in the United States. The 14th Amendment was natural born citizenship. Okay, but we still had that 3/5 compromise nonsense. So it took the 15th Amendment finally. They got through in 1870 that it was ratified, where then the slaves, people of color, finally got their full citizenship. Okay, and then Article 16 in 1913 was when we first had to start paying income taxes. The 16th Amendment gives Congress the power to do that. Okay, some other important one, 19. Okay, 19 is giving women the right to vote, came through in 1920. And then the last couple I'll talk about here, the 18th and the 21st. Okay, the 18th is the only amendment to ever be repealed from the Constitution. It was prohibition, outlawed the sale and transportation of alcohol. That went through it in January 6, 1919, and you can see it was repealed by the 21st Amendment in 1933. Okay, so you can easily find this online. So if you're not familiar with it, go through and read our Constitution. It is our supreme law of the land, and it is what every court must follow, every state must follow. Okay, nothing can contradict the U.S. Constitution. After that, as far as sources of laws go, each state has their own constitution, and that is collectively known as constitutional law. Okay, our second source of law is statutory law. Statutory law is what most people think of when they think of laws, right? This is the laws that are getting made by our legislature. Okay, this is what goes through the House of Representatives, through the Senate, and eventually gets signed by the president on the federal level. On the state level, you have your state representatives, your state senators. Okay, they're all organized in a different way depending on which state you're living in, but they are your legislature. And even then, you can go even down further to the local level when you start talking about city ordinances that come out, okay, from city boards, county boards, and stuff like that. Anything that's passed through an elected official, that becomes known as statutory law. Our third type of law then is administrative law. Okay, this is where a lot of people they don't see this. This is because these elected officials are not making these laws. Okay, our elected officials are passing laws, and then they're giving them off to these administrative agencies in order to make the rules. Okay, these are government agencies, sometimes ran by Congress, sometimes actually ran by the executive branch. Okay, and they make rules that you have to follow. And if you were to break one of these rules, you would have to go through their court process. Okay, we're going to learn in some other videos, and we're going to talk about the courts and how they're set up. The administrative agencies have their own court system that you have to go into. So you think about some federal administrative agencies that make rules and laws that never go through Congress. Congress just gives them the power to do it. Think of like the Internal Revenue Service, OSHA, right? The Environmental Protection Agency. Groups like these These are administrative agencies. They make some rules and stuff we have to live by. All right, and finally here, the last thing we're going to talk about here is case law and common law. Okay, there's a term known as stare decisis or precedent. Okay, we'll dig more into that when we talk about the court system, but what it basically means is that courts should decide similar cases in a similar manner. If it has been decided by the courts before, it kind of becomes law. That is the way it's going to be done moving forward. Okay, common law refers back, it's Old English, all right? Some of the stuff that even here in the United States that we're practicing today that's part of our common law has been brought over from England in their old traditions. Okay, and this brings up an interesting debate, like should precedent ever be overturned? Okay, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit in our discussion this week when we talk about Roe versus Wade in there, and that is precedent. That is the stare decisis, following decisions which the courts have already ruled on. At times, there can be good reason to overturn precedent and not follow this. But the important thing with all this chapter is usually those decisions, they do become sort of cemented law. So if you're ever going to bring a court case and you can look through court records, you can see, hey, if somebody brought this kind of case before, what's the court going to do? Because the court's going to look at that when they're making their decision. Okay, because case law, common law is a source of American law. All right, so that's enough for now. I look forward to talking to you again in the next video when we're going to talk about the difference between civil and criminal law. Until then, have a good one.